Alright, welcome back to my videos, and in this video I'm going to be going over the fall of man, specifically Genesis chapter 3, and I have a list of certain topics right here that I'm going to go over. The first one being the serpent, which is commonly referred to as Satan, even though I don't think it specifically says it is Satan, but it's just referred to as a serpent in this chapter, but it's commonly referred to as Satan. And the next topic is the forbidden tree, the forbidden tree. Basically, God told Adam and Eve was the only rule in the Garden of Eden is to not to touch or eat of the fruit of that tree, or you'll surely die. And right here we have Adam and Eve. Obviously, everyone knows who Adam and Eve is. It's the first two humans God ever made. Adam was made from dust, and Eve was made from the rib of Adam. And right here is that they were tempted. So basically, the whole focal point of this chapter is Adam and Eve being tempted to eat of the fruit of the tree. Of course, tempted by the serpent itself, which, like I said, commonly referred to as Satan. Basically, the way that the serpent did this was trying to trick them into believing that eating of the fruit will cause them to be gods, pretty much, and pretty much know from good and evil and everything, become like God himself, which is kind of ironic because that's the same kind of mindset that Satan had whenever he fell. He wanted to be like God. Of course, that was his downfall. He was casted out of heaven. And this next one is that they hid their sin from God. And we see this whenever they made aprons out of leaves and plants and stuff to hide their nakedness from God. And next up we have is that they were banished from Eden. And these two kind of go together. This is not so much of a topic as much as like an interesting character, I guess. But they were banished from Eden for their sin. And the cherubim right here. Now, cherubim are a type of like a type of angel. I'll get to that in another video explaining them a little bit. But it says at the very end of them, at the very end of the chapter, in chapter 3, verse 24, it says, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and the flaming sword was turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." So all that we know is that they're kind of like a warrior class of angels. So right here, I'm just going to go through each of these and kind of describe how each of these events unfolded. So we start off in chapter 3, verse 1, where it's describing the serpent as subtle. And I'll read this right here. "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yeah, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden." So that passage right there basically describes the serpent as very cunning, very subtle, pretty much like a trickster kind of character. And so we keep reading on through here. We're going to skip down to verse 3. And this is where Eve is talking to the serpent. It says, "But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." So what that basically means is they weren't allowed to eat or touch it because they would die afterwards. And the very next verse in chapter 3, verse 4 says, "And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." So basically, this is the whole concept of the serpent tempting Adam and Eve to sin. Basically, the serpent is the catalyst for the fall of man. And that's basically how the whole thing transpired, was that he wanted them, he kind of tricked them to believe that they were going to be gods. So, of course, Eve ate from the fruit first, and then Adam ate. And so I got a list of like questions right here. It's all answered in this chapter. And they're kind of a little bit more abstract questions, but they all kind of lead back into this chapter right here. So the first question we have is why we need God's mercy. It's obviously because we sinned against him. We broke his only rule in the Garden of Eden. Of course, he said not to eat of the fruit of the tree. Of course, Adam and Eve both did. And now we have, why did Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit? Of course, Satan tempted them and tricked them into eating it, making them believe that they were going to be gods, knowing good and evil. And why did God put the forbidden fruit in the garden in the first place? Is that basically this isn't explicitly stated, but what I've basically inferred from it was to set clear boundaries and consequences for humanity and their actions. So what I mean by that is God said the only rule at the beginning of time was for Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit. And of course, that just kind of sets a boundary like, hey, you can do anything you want to, just don't eat that. And of course, they broke that only rule, and so God casted them out, made them work for their own food, and he basically set clear boundaries and consequences for humanity. Of course, the consequences was having to live in sin, having to die, having to work for their own food and everything. And the whole moral of the story is the world that we live in now is the consequences of our sin that we are all guilty of. So, leading back to that last question, we're all guilty of that sin. We all disobey God. We all betray God every single day. And of course, this right here is like a little image that I drew of Adam and Eve eating of the fruit. I have the little, it's a crappy drawing, but that's fine. But the whole theme of this story is that even though they were made perfectly, they were still tempted, and we still failed. That's why we're failed creatures. So the whole point of this story is kind of like a reminder that everyone sins, and we have to live with the consequences now. But it's only by the grace of God that we're able to have salvation. And I think that's going to do it for this video. It's a very just a brief summary of the fall of man. Nothing too in depth. Again, it's only one chapter. It takes up like one page in my Bible, so it's not. There's nothing too very in depth. And if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope you have a fantastic day.